This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Full throttle, full gear, full metal gear, all out. It's getting hot and heavy in the NBA, man. Nice way for the NBA season to turn over into 2024 with a lot of movements, a lot of fluctuations taking place in the Eastern and Western conferences in kind. And thankfully, my right-hand man didn't get lost in the Bermuda Triangle, so he was able to hop back onto the stateside and chop it up with me. What's good, my man? Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna PNC, what's good, my man?
Man, happy to be back. Second show of the new year and the whole nine, but it's exciting time as always. The NBA, it's wild. I was on my little vacay, watching the feeds. I said, "Oh, this guy went down, and this guy went down, and this happened, and this happened." I was like, "Oh, I need to jump back into this joint." So we'll touch on a little bit of that too obviously on this week's show, man. But as always, man, just happy to be here. And just get the baseline popping, man. 2024 has already been a good year.
Absolutely, man. I got to ask you, though, real quick. What did you think of Darko's rant?
What?
Darko's rant, Raptors head coach. What do you think?
Oh, this guy. Yeah,
man. He's everybody's favorite coach now, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's a spirited individual. Let's say that. And he makes some great facial expressions. So the Raptors are having not their best year. Obviously, they made a move here, maybe making some more moves. So we'll see. That'll put him in a better disposition to kind of close things up. But yeah, he's been in the news a little bit more often than I think he'd like to be in the last,
He's been in the news more often than Scotty Barnes is, and yet he was the one trying to stick up for his boy.
Very true.
How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think very, very unkindly for Toronto. That's how it's working, but it's going.
It's going. It's doing something. Anyway, we'd like to welcome you and yours to the baseline, my man Warren Shaw, and myself, your boy Game Face Lee. As always, we appreciate y'all chopping it up with us and being a part of the conversation. Be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Go to www.baselinenba.com for it's our home site, so you can catch all of our previous episodes. Also, if you're catching us on YouTube, you can clearly tell who's in Florida and who's up north. But be sure to check us out, and you see the blue and white logo on the YouTube channel. That is us. That's the 19 Media Group. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check out not only the baseline, but the plethora of great NBA, but the great shows that the 19 Media Group family has to offer. And if you guys haven't been catching this over the last couple of weeks, no worries. But if you've been checking us out on the media outlets, once again, we like to extend our thank yous to everybody who's been a part of the Baseline NBA to help make us one of the finalists in the Sports Podcast Awards for 2024. We are a finalist for the best basketball NBA podcast or best basketball podcast. So if you're interested in voting, we encourage you to go to www.sportspodgroup.com, sportspodgroup.com. Head over there, go to shortlists, look for the best, look for basketball podcast. Click on it. We'll be down on the lower right-hand corner. And as always, we encourage you to vote. Also, want to make sure we give love and shout outs to our partners on the wrestling side of things, Gimmick Infringement. They also are up for Best Wrestling Podcast Award. So if you're feeling the 19 Media Group family, if you're feeling our shows, please go to sportspodgroup.com and locate us, locate Gimmick Infringement, and click a vote in there and show your love and support. And to those who have already voted and also shown that love and support, we thank you as always. We would not be doing our thing if not for you. Great show on tap. My man Sean and I got some news and notes over the last few days, over the week or so. Some news has been popping off in the NBA, so we're gonna get into that. And then we got a little who you got segment, man. It's been a while we did that. We got 2 interesting players that we're going to put on our Who You Got segment, and we'll be interested to see where you may fall on that. But definitely a great show on tap. So as always, we appreciate you guys for keeping us on lock and again, showing that love and support. And make sure that you catch us on the media outlets as well too. So Sean, let's get started. Obviously, the big news that's going out right now is Memphis Grizzlies, Morant being gone for the season, and then also to add insult to injury, Desmond Bane being out for 6 weeks. We've talked about this, obviously the season, in my perspective, of whether or not the Grizzlies would inject themselves back into the playoff or play-in situation would be predicated on, Morant's presence and availability. And then clearly, unfortunate circumstances taking him out of the loop. And then you couple that with Desmond Bane suffering an injury as well, too. Arguably, the Memphis Grizzlies backcourt is gone. There's not much that you really can do if you're the Grizz.
Yeah. And Fakati even put the nose. Obviously, Marcus Smart also out now for, 6 weeks or so as well, too. So I think the Memphis Grizzlies season, unfortunately, is effectively finished. While there was some conversation, we spent a lot of time here on our show. Shouts to the great Michael Wallace from Grind City Media coming on the episode about 3 weeks ago here now, and kind of laying it out what Memphis might be able to do and maybe getting back into the hunt. Their season would just seem to be cursed from the very beginning. So with Bane, Smart, you still have Adams out for the entire year. Brandon Clark still out for most of the year. Might come back at the end. I don't see the point in Memphis really doing anything right now than developing the young guys. Smart may come back and will probably play. Bane may even come back too, but there's some people thinking that Bane will probably just take the rest of the season off. I just feel really sad that this is the way that it's gone from Memphis here. So clearly a rebuilding year. See if they can develop Vince Williams, Zaire Williams as well, Tillman, and get Jaren Jackson to be a little bit more effective and more impactful in the way that he can be aggressive on the basketball corner on a regular basis. So when those guys come back, hopefully next year and are healthy, Memphis can go back on that upward ascension that we've seen them going, that they were on at least 2 or 3 years ago. But this just a terrible blow for an organization that's had a rough go of things here basically since last spring.
Yeah, it sucks. It really does suck. I think, this version of the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm not blaming, John Morant. Obviously, John Morant's situations really exacerbated what took place. But I think you can clearly see that there was something that needed to happen for the Memphis Grizzlies to kind of like keep the focus on an obvious. The goal is to get to a championship. The goal is to get to the NBA Finals. And the moves that they made clearly was with the intent to try to keep this team together while still allowing the talent to kind of, catch up with what they have put themselves in over the last couple of years. So with that being said, I agree with you. I think this is a perfect opportunity for Taylor Jenkins to sharpen his iron a little bit. I think that a lot of where this Memphis Grizzlies team is going to be not just about the return of all of their core players, but also what version of Jenkins are you going to see in leading these guys to what the goal should be, which is to get to the NBA Finals. It is not as if the Memphis Grizzlies cannot compete with any of the teams that are in the Western Conference. I think we can safely say, yes, if you want to make the argument that the Denver Nuggets are the best team in the West, even though their record doesn't really depict it. But when you look up from a matchup perspective, clearly the Denver Nuggets stand out. You can make an argument that the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that's on the come up, which we've seen the Memphis Grizzlies handle over the last couple of years. If you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, if there is ever a window for you to make this run, knowing that the Memphis Grizzlies will not be a part of your picture,
yeah,
I think it's time to make that run, right? And then you look at all of the other teams like the Clippers, the Lakers, who are very, quote unquote, legendary player heavy with their rosters. And so the West is completely wide open. This is a perfect opportunity for Taylor Jenkins to kind of really, hunker down and really get in on some of these young guys and really build up the depth of this team. Because I guarantee you that no matter what happens, you cannot be afforded the opportunity of another chance to get to where you're going to get to if you're going to continually lose your key players. And that means the likes of the Desmond Banes, the Marcus Smarts, and the Ja Morants. Now, knock on wood, Bane and Smart, they've been pretty durable type players, but we have seen those tendencies where those Knicks have compromised them, and then they become depleted from a backcourt perspective. So that to me is why I want to see what Jenkins does in seeing what he has with the talent, because this is no longer going to be about money, cap space, or anything like that. Are these guys going to improve with the opportunity that's been given to them? And are you as a coach going to be able to show that level of improvement by getting those guys to go out and compete, given the fact that this is a lost season?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really all you can do here at this stage. So they don't necessarily need to do a whole lot of tinkering. I'd be curious to understand if they want to be involved in the trade market in any capacity. Do they feel like they can improve their roster by maybe cobbling some of their current players together as assets and saying, all right, well, you may or may not be part of the long-term plans. And do they do something in that vein? But I feel what the right move here is, as we alluded to, is probably just to play this out, really see what you have here now without those main guys there. And then you can make some of those decisions at the end of the season. If the Williamses, the Xavier Tillmans of the world are not meant to be on your roster moving forward, then those are decisions you can try to figure out to do at the end of the season after you've given them an extended look here in these last, 45 plus games.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we continue with our news and notes. Big trade. Well, movements were made. Okay. The Washington Wizards, man, they like to wheel and deal, man. They got what is it? They got players out there. So the Washington Wizards wind up getting Marvin Bagley and Isiah Livers. Is it Livers or Livers? Livers. Okay. For Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala and a few second-round picks. Obviously, I don't know. Do you think this moves the needle? Doesn't move the needle for me.
Well, what it does for Detroit is clear some of the salary cap. So in some ways, we've been wondering why they held on to so many front court players to begin with. So they moved Marvin Bagley into a situation to clear some space now that Isaiah Stewart is back from his injury. They're dealing with Cade's injury right now in the backcourt. But at the end of the day, they needed to get some of these guys out of the way. Bagley, Wiseman, Stewart, Jalen Durant, there's just too many of them. So they re-upped Bagley for whatever reason last season. So now they're like, all right, that was a mistake. Let's move him on. He goes to a Washington team that obviously isn't very good either and can obviously utilize some depth at all positions, front court or otherwise. So Bagley will get a third chance here now to try to earn some minutes in the Washington rotation, whether that is as the backup behind Daniel Gafford, or if he ends up taking that starting center role from him at some point. That remains to be seen. But I like the move from Detroit only in the aspects like they needed to clear the deck some, and they did just that. They had to give up 2 second rounders in addition, and it's to kind of get that situation done at the end of the day. But I think it's a good move for them. They will probably not keep Gallinari and Muscalla. Those guys probably get waived and then maybe get picked up. Gallo probably with the most amount of interest around the leagues. Muscalla is going to be a kind of a career journeyman here. So in that way, it's not a move that is going to move the needle for anybody one way or the other than Detroit clearing some salary. But it does kind of give some indication that people are going to be active this trade season. And we have, 2-3 weeks left before the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's going to pick up, I almost totally forgot Danilo Gallinari actually is healthy enough to play. So, take that for what it's worth. It's, yeah, I mean, you need a shooter. Okay, no problem. Mike Muscala I find to be interesting because I do think that there's value with him to be on some kind of a team, clearly for front court presence and stuff. I think he's a pretty decent player. He's actually, a physical kind of player, which, I think, some teams could bowl well for having that to deepen their front court. But, again, probably the more interesting aspect of this is, Marvin Bagley getting moved like to the Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just say this, in closing out, I mean, hasn't proven to be a winning basketball player, and right now, I think the combination of Poole and Kuzma isn't proving to be winning basketball. So, can he go there and inject some semblance of life? Can he go there and give them some energy and try to get them towards the pattern of winning ways. And not that Marvin Bagley is going to be this culture setter and this culture changer, but the three of them, three guys who have really kind of struggled, I guess, and to various points, and especially this season specifically. But no one's looking at them to do much. So can they now, add that into that, or are you just adding? Excuse my curtness here. Are you just adding another guy? Another, and some would say another loser into that locker room. I think that three of them probably need to galvanize and like, hey, listen. Kuzma doesn't necessarily feel like a cast off, right? I don't think he feels that way. He's actually just re-signed to be in Washington, and he could have gone elsewhere. But it's obviously not going the way that they wanted to. And as we record, the Pistons and Wizards played today, with the Pistons winning their fourth game of the year against the Wizards, who they just made the trade with. So to me, right, Bagley, Kuzma, and Poole need to kind of bond together and say, all right, what can we do to salvage the rest of this season and start to establish some semblance of a winning culture here that is going to make other people maybe want to come, or can we just get better ourselves, with the three guys there who are talented individuals. So that's what I'm looking for and hope will happen for this Wizards team.
So the only thing I'm really thinking about, Shaw, as you were bringing this up, is what is this? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wes Unseld Jr. is still the head coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what does this look like? You know what I'm saying, for Wes Unseld Jr. Because Bagley, Kuzma, and Poole, don't ring, a level of endorsement unless you as a coach are versatile enough to figure out a way to make it work for these guys, right? Your system can allow for these guys to flourish. And it's clear that the system that Unseld has implemented has not allowed Kuzma and Poole to flourish, or at least play together enough so that you can see something flourish. So I just find it to be interesting that they just keep throwing players into the mix, whether it's for financial purposes, it's shake-up purposes, whatever. I'm just saying that, like, it's putting to me a lot on Unseld Jr. to kind of figure this thing out when we don't even know who he is and where he is in the grand scheme of things as it pertains to the Wizards. You know what I'm saying? If this is a stopgap, I don't think that we'll really see the fruition of these three guys making it work, or two guys, or whatever the ratio, the faction of this reflects. It's going to take place maybe after Unseld Jr. is no longer a part of the team. I'm sure that there's a level of patience, but I'm just saying that, like, if you just keep throwing players at him and the players are not giving you anything, there's going to come a point where you stop looking at the players, you start looking at the coach. And I say that as an unfair assessment, but I think that that's what the assessment might be nonetheless, because of the oddity in which they're doing these type of transactions. It just doesn't feel like Unseld has a say, you know what I'm saying? Or there's a vision in which, when these moves are being made, there's a logical end game to it, at least for the Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get into a deep conversation about Washington here, but Michael Winger now is, as the executive there in charge, they're trying to figure out what their direction is. And I'll say this again, I feel like I've been harping on it, but I know they expected Kuzma and Poole to be better than they both have shown and impact winning in a way that they weren't going to win 25 games at this stage of the season. Like, they weren't going to be competing for a playoff spot, but 7 wins, and the way that Poole specifically has looked is not what they expected. So I think what they're trying to do now is, all right, well, how much talent can we potentially accumulate? You get rid of 2 veteran guys, if in essence, and from what I heard or gleaned is that Gallo really does feel like he can still play, and he missed most of last year with that. Well, he missed all of last year with that injury. So now to only be getting spot minutes when he's finally healthy, he was a little bit of a malcontent within that locker room. So they're like, all right, well, a little addition by subtraction here. We get rid of this veteran guy. Well, Detroit does whatever they decide to do with him, and we bring in Bagley now to put alongside some of our younger guys who even we didn't expect to be this porous, or for the Knicks to be as bad. So you do got to continue to tinker. I think Avdia has been a pleasant surprise for Washington. He's captured that starting small forwardish, power forwardish spot, and he's played well, having his best season. But I think the rest of it, you're just kind of like, all right, well, who is everybody? Gafford, he's an energy big, but not somebody you build around. Corey Kispert, somebody who I think they still expect to be better at some point, but having his struggles here in what this is, his second year or third year. So ultimately, Washington is trying to accumulate the pieces, and I don't know that it falls on Unseld just yet. I think there is a lot of buyer's remorse, I think, on some of, especially with the Jordan Poole situation. And then from there, as the season kind of goes on, they'll see who's really going to be there. I'll be watching the trade deadline to see if they actually move Tyus Jones as well. Because I don't think he's had quite the impact that they expected as well, too. Everyone, hey, best backup point guard in the league. Well, should he just be a backup point guard? And I don't mean that in any level of disrespect. I just don't. I think a lot of people are like, all right, in this role, he was this. So imagine when he gets full starters minutes. And I think he struggled to produce in the way that people would expect it. So it's not all on Poole, it's all on Kuzma. And Tyus Jones has a little bit to do with this as well, too. But to your point, is the scheme and is the offense and defense that Wes Unseld is running conducive to the talent that's on the roster? And that's the thing that they need to figure out in these last, 40 plus games.
Yeah. And just to, reiterate here, or to make clear, I'm not saying that you're misquoting where I was coming from, saying that the eye should be on Unseld. But what I was saying is that when you continue making these type of moves and you're throwing this many young bodies to a coach and you're not seeing any results, there's going to come a point where they're going to stop looking at the players and they're going to start looking at the coaching. And then they're going to look at whether or not the system is conducive for the level of the type of talent that they're bringing in, regardless of the level of malcontent or the misunderstood, the misfits, so to speak, because to your point, you don't want these players to be labeled as losers, right? But you certainly don't want them going out there without a sense of understanding of how to compete. And I think that's part of the problem, is people are not able to translate properly of whether or not this team is just not competitive, they don't know how to win, or they absolutely have no clue what they're doing, or they're not good enough. There's just so many ways that this can go. And I would hope that for a young coach like Unseld, he's not getting caught in the crosshairs of a organization that clearly may have had good intentions about their initial blueprint and have now decided to pivot and have totally forgotten that they still have to bring him on board with where they're pivoting to. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, all right. Finally, Shaw, let's talk about Draymond Green. He's expected to return to the Golden State Warriors. How are you feeling about the return of Dre?
There's only two sentiments you can have. Either you don't believe it, or the proof is just going to be in the pudding. And that's kind of where I'm at. I think there's some people who are just going to write him off. And at this point, it can only be done, for me, it can only be shown how he behaves moving forward here the rest of this season and really the rest of his career. The Warriors are in a really rough way. I had a conversation, again, shameless plug, with Gary Washburn recently talking about the Celtics, and we touched on the Draymond Green situation. And one of the things that we came to determination with is this next month, 10, 12 games, whatever it is for them, is going to be huge. Because if Draymond comes back and kind of establish them in some semblance of a way that gets them back to what they used to be, and obviously not at the championship level, but winning basketball, I think for this season, not championship, but just winning basketball, that will determine how they maneuver, I think, the trade deadline. There's this unnatural, for some people's liking, unnatural affinity to the old guard, and understanding, well, can the old guard still get it done? I think Draymond's return goes a long way in determining that, but there's going to be a short window for Mike Dunleavy Jr. in the front office to decide if this is the direction that they want to stay down this path for this year. Rumors are coming out that they don't want to move Moses Moody or Jonathan Kuminga, but understand that they might have to improve this roster significantly this season. So to me, it's a long-winded way of saying there's a lot riding on Draymond's return, not just his overall behavior, but really the present and future of the Warriors as we currently know them. If he can kind of get back to the guy who just plays basketball and plays it with a high basketball IQ, that can really help the Warriors get back to winning basketball, and then they can see where they can go from there.
Yeah, I just think he needs to decide on what's important to him as it pertains to the contributions that he can make for this team. I think it comes down to that, really simply put, for me. There was a time where I thought everybody was giving way too much praise for Draymond's ability, to handle the basketball. He's a spiritual leader. I'm not taking anything away from that. I do think that he's one of the spiritual leaders on this team. He is definitely, he's the physicality, he's the muscle. He gives the team the intensity, the identity that they're not a pushover. minus the antics and stuff like that. But this isn't about the antics, man. It's really about Draymond Green's, excuse me here. It's really about Draymond Green's accountability while he is on the basketball court. I don't think if people really understand, and maybe one day, I can find somebody that can, mine me some metrics and stuff. But I'm just saying that the eye test has shown me Draymond has really been very careless as it pertains to, how he's played defensively. He's been very careless with his ability when he turns the ball over. He's blown assignments from time to time. And all of that, demonstrative mannerisms that he displays at times doesn't absolve the accountability factor that he should be having on himself when he puts his teammates in compromising positions because of some of those plays, whether you consider them boneheadedness or you're just really saying, you know what, this is the result of someone who's lost a step. You know what I'm saying? So I think, to your point, Shaw, a lot of it is going to be predicated about the moves that the Warriors are going to make. I think a lot of it is predicated on the value of Draymond Green to the basketball team, period, point blank. Because I'm telling you right now, even if Steve Kerr chooses to try and push Draymond Green out there, if Draymond Green does not exhibit the type of player that was necessary during those championship runs where he's making smart decisions, he's really helping the team, you're basically making Steve Kerr look bad, because all it reflects is all he knows how to do is coach Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green, and nobody else.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is what kills that window more than anything on whether or not this core group, this championship group, can stay together.
Well, I think that's extremely, extremely well said. And ultimately here now, this, like I said, these next 3 weeks here are going to be almost a referendum in a way that is probably unduly and not fair based on the overall body of work. However, we are where we're at. And
Exactly.
I think at this stage of the game, it might be exactly what the Warriors need to kind of determine their overall path and
The
direction.
Warriors pushed all their chips in on the reason why we're this bad is because we don't have Draymond Green. So Draymond Green comes back and you guys don't have this type of turnaround that you're saying you could have had he been with the team fully, you know what I'm saying? And you can't use last year's incident with Poole and stuff anymore as the excuse. If this Warriors team does not turn things around, this is not just a Draymond problem.
Yeah.
It is not. All it's just a reflection of is the Warriors making the excuse that it's the lack of Draymond Green, when really the window is effectively closed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that they should have been making moves, or Steve Kerr should have been making adjustments to properly utilize the roster that he's had the last couple of years in order for them to compensate for what the core can no longer give them because they're not whole.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, let's continue to watch what the Warriors ultimately do here. Draymond's return. Hope he's back in the right mental space to just play basketball and get back to the high level of basketball that he can give, helping Steph and Klay get those open shots, rebounding, creating offense, all those things that we know him for. Obviously, the defense, and we can forget this other stuff here too, because what's going on the court is a lot more interesting to the rest of us.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got our segment we haven't done in quite some time. Is Who You Got, man. It's always a good one, man, because we usually, my man Shaw, you know what I'm saying, the devious mind that he is, he always keeps coming up with the players to put us in these very uncomfortable situations of selecting. So you don't want to miss out as we get down with our segment of Who You Got. But first, if you're looking for the ultimate destination of NBA gear, then you need to look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with an exclusive and limited edition of items, you can make your selection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store /Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link. And as always, we thank you for your support. More Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, don't go away. Time now for Who You Got, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And when it comes to the game of basketball, it's always a great time of the year for us to take two players who have been making a lot of noise and put people in a state of pontification and have them think about, if you had to build a team, who would you really start your team with? Who would be your building block? That is our coveted Who You Got. And again, the devious mind of Shaw comes up with two players for us to have this conversation on: Paulo Banchero and Alperen Sengun. Shaw, what the hell were you thinking when you decided to come up with these two dudes?
Well, more or less looking at the landscape of guys who are having good basketball seasons in general, who are young, obviously, and both Sengun and Banchero are younger guys. Paulo, obviously, the number one pick. Sengun was the 16th pick in the year before that. So not apples to apples in terms of their draft stock, but I think Sengun now here in his third year, under the tutelage now of Udoka in Houston, is playing his best basketball, and we've said this many, many times. Everyone in the NBA is comparing Sengun to Jokic because he's a guy who can score, rebound, and pass the basketball and plays with a high basketball IQ in general. While Paulo over in Orlando is this 6'9", 6'10" guy, physical, can handle, can also score, can also pass the basketball, rebound at an acceptable rate, and is more of the prototypical guy that you build around in today's NBA. But I bring up the question because we've seen the success, obviously, that the Nuggets have, and while Sengun is not Joker, at least not yet, right? And I don't even think in the third year of Jokic that we think that he was going to be what he ultimately is. But Sengun is on a better path now than Jokic was even in his third year. So that's how I kind of got to this, devious kind of conversation. And I'd be curious to kind of see where you go. And where our friends and listeners go. And I mean, I have a sneaking sense that it's going to skew to one particular player just because of the way the NBA is typically built. But I think the Sengun situation is bolstered a little bit because of what we've seen with Jokic. And if he can replicate that success, can Houston be ultimately successful in some years to come?
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to get caught up with the eye candy, but I think you have to really look at it within the scope of what is this player's role allow your team, your roster to be able to do, not just from a year, but 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now. I know this is going to sound crazy, Shaw, because I think if anyone who knows me and knows how my mind operates, I would probably be going with Banchero. I like Banchero. I think he's going to be an exciting NBA player, and I think he's a foundational player, which is why this is such a tough decision. Me, I would probably wind up going with Sengun right now. It's interesting that you utilize the Jokic comparison because that is kind of like the murmurs, like the conversations that are out there. I, in many respects, see him in a way that is very similar to, I don't want to use, I really don't want to use Giannis in this way because what I want to say is as an international player, his acceleration to me is very similar to that of Giannis. Where you look at the roster and you can clearly tell that he is the most talentedly unnoticed player coming up, who earned the respect now because of him basically bullying his way in and showing people what he is capable of. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's what Giannis had basically done, because when the Milwaukee Bucks drafted him, they saw the possibilities, but I don't think that they truly appreciated, what it took as far as the level of greatness until he just had to kick the doors down and finally got his opportunity, got his chance, right? And I see that within Sengun, because look at all of the draft picks that the Houston Rockets have gone and put on that roster, even a couple who are no longer on the roster. And when it's all said and done, Sengun is the one who's still left standing. And you called it out, Shaw. You're like, you really like, the way that Sengun has elevated himself. And this guy's only been in the league for 3 years, but you're seeing rapid ascension, and you're seeing where he's no longer like something that's an added piece. I think if you're Ime Udoka, you really have to consider he is our cornerstone piece. He is our guy. He is who we have to filter through on both sides of the basketball. And that's the reason why I kind of use the Giannis adage to that. Whereas with the Orlando Magic, I feel like they were thankful that Banchero has made himself this good. In so many ways, he has helped kind of mask a lot of the deficiencies themselves. But I feel like in a grand scheme of things, if you're the Houston Rockets, I feel like he can get the Rockets to a contending level and sustainably contending level than I would probably see with Banchero, just because there's still so many other players that play the position that Banchero plays, but but nothing like what I've seen with Sengun doing over, this past season, this leapfrog from last year to this year.
You know what? I'll support it in the aspect of, because I think when you start to talk about the best centers in the league, and that's a blurred line right now, or I think we know that, who are the true like straight centers in the NBA. And the conversations have been had in NBA circles where it's like, okay, well, it's Embiid, sure. Then it's Embiid, Jokic, whichever order you want to put it. But Jokic is probably first. Jokic and Embiid as the top two guys. And then you wonder, right? So Bam in Miami has played center for the majority of his career. Is he really a center? I mean, he's probably more for by old school traditions, but what Miami's been doing, hey, he can guard 1 through 5, so they have him at the 5. Those 3 guys definitively for some would be above Sengun at this current standpoint. But now if you throw into the aspects of Wembanyama, who he's a center by height, not necessarily by skill set. Chet, similar situation as well too. Maybe, but not right now here today. But if you're building your team around, you're going to build your team around Wemby more than Sengun. But at the end of the day, the point of this exercise is Sengun is not that far down the list in terms of even top centers. When you put them out there. When it comes to Banchero, because he plays such a crowded position with so many guys, he doesn't necessarily scratch the surface of the top 5. For where he is in that kind of that 3-4 wing position. Not because he's not good, it's just because there's so much talent at the position. But when you're building and starting a team, most people would say, you know what, you need that versatility, someone with Banchero's size and who can also switch. And he does have the passing and playmaking chops as well. And that's where most people would go. But I like your pick of saying that you would pick Sengun over Banchero, not because Banchero was bad, only because of where you see Sengun potentially, the heights that he could potentially reach, with Houston or whatever. And I think that's the thing in the who you got exercises, irrespective of the team that they're currently on and the talent that's around them. If you're starting from scratch, let's say, and it's an expansion draft and both of these guys are available, which one would you take first? And I would actually go with Paulo, but you can't go wrong with Sengun in this situation, only because of the aspect of what we're seeing him do. And I think he's a better playmaker than Paulo is currently at this stage of their careers.
So it's interesting that you would go with Paulo, because like I said, in most other scenarios where we do who you got, I think anyone who knows us would have thought that I went with Paulo and you would probably go with Sengun. Look, you had been high on Sengun, right? And I mentioned that a little bit a while ago about that. You had been high on him. And I think to me, a lot of it is reflective of what I see from, that level of aggressiveness. There's it's what made this one very difficult, because I see that in Paulo as well too. Paulo came out like gangbusters, and I really feel like in many regards he validated his level of stardom in the NBA at a time when I don't think people were taking the Rookie of the Year candidacy seriously, right? Like when he got drafted, there really wasn't a whole lot of noise about Banchero's, play for the Orlando Magic, except for him playing for the Orlando Magic. So like if he was playing for some other team other than the Orlando Magic, then the hype about him being as a Rookie of the Year, I think would have had some some oomph to it, would have had a little bit of gusto to it. But I think his play reinserted the validation of being a rookie of the year. And to me, that speaks volumes, which is why it made very difficult between me to, choosing a guy like Sengun or going with Banchero, because it basically takes you, it really takes you bullying the situation for people to then take notice for what it is that you're capable of showing people. And so these two guys, I think, in different ways, they're different paths, but it's all meeting to the same place, is that they have kind of taken the NBA by hostage in a way to get them to see their level of potential greatness for not just the teams that they're playing for, but they themselves as individuals and what they're doing to elevate their games.
Yeah, and the numbers actually skew towards Sengun this specific season here as we record. Like all the advanced analytics, some things a lot of people don't necessarily care about, like win shares and whatever offensive and defensive rating, things of those nature. A lot of those things skew towards Sengun currently. But I think what's the defining factor for me right now at this stage is I think Paulo is going to become a better rebounder and also a better playmaker as the years go on, as Sengun will, I think, to some degree. But there's just going to be more versatility with Paulo long term. Sengun is faster than Jokic, right? With that, we know that he's a little bit more athletic than Jokic is currently, not quite as girthy in general. But I think, when it comes back to Paulo, he's definitely the more athletic of the two guys here too, and can really try to guard maybe even 1 through 5 to some degree. He's going to have struggles with those fives.
Who do you think is more polished? Let me ask you that question. Who do you think is more polished?
Yeah, more polished, but by polished you mean in terms of like who's more smooth, or just overall skill set?
Whose game do you find to show a level of smoothness? Between Sengun and Banchero.
Yeah, Banchero is going to is more likely to ooh and ah you with his skill set, especially off the bounce, step backs, in that array of things offensively. But Sengun, I think what he does is he surprises people, with how good he is, a little bit kind of awkward body shape, if you will. And just people look at him and like don't think he's going to be able to do some of the things that he can do, and he can take you off the dribble at times as well. But the overall, just kind of the fluidity of the game, I think that leans towards Paulo pretty easily.
Right, and so that's the reason why I like, maybe going with someone like Sengun, because those are things that he can clearly improve on, and even as he is doing it, he's giving you 21, almost 22 a night. You know what I'm saying? Like he's almost at 9 rebounds a night. Like there's a level of rawness still that you see in his game that can clearly be better through technique and execution. To your point is where now I go the route of Jokic, because that ultimately is what we saw, is like Jokic's, elevation in his ability to work on some of those nuanced aspects of him has now taken him from being someone who was, he remember, the Denver Nuggets had both him and Yusuf Nurkic at one time, right? And ultimately, when they finally got rid of Nurkic and they said, we're going to go with Jokic, something clicked, and Jokic then suddenly became the most versatile player you'll ever see. And whether that's just been off-season training, whatever it was that drove that to that particular point, I'm saying there is that type of room of opportunity for someone like Sengun, in the sense that some of those things that usually take years upon years upon years for some players to get right or get good at, you know what I'm saying, just doesn't happen. You're already seeing that, and that's with the rawness of talent. That's why I was mentioning Giannis a little bit, because you saw the rawness of Giannis's ability and how he wasn't, when he finally learned on technique and execution and becoming more polished, then you see him completely catapult. Now, do I think that Sengun is going to be, MVP? I don't know just yet. But I do know that if what you're telling me is certain things need to be polished for him to be better, if he becomes an all-star here, who is there to say that he doesn't become all NBA, by next year? You know what I'm saying? Like, sure. Where would that be from as far as a far stretch goes? I think what it comes down to is, do you as an organization or someone who has a player like Sengun who clearly sees that, what are you doing to quickly build around that rather than still trying to kind of scratch the surface and determine if whether or not this is real or fugazi.
No, I mean, again, all really, really great points. The usage numbers skew towards Banchero right now, 29.7. I think it's 27 and change for Sengun. So imagine if Sengun got a little bit more usage, got the same usage that Paulo got. Imagine if he got 3 more minutes a game, as this current season we're talking about, the 3 more minutes per game that Paulo gets as well too. Sengun's overall stat profile could be even better than it is and even more comparable to Paulo's. For me, where it comes down to long term, I think, again, it goes back to the overall versatility. And then Paulo, at least for right now, his ability to potentially at least shoot a 3 ball, and that's not a knock on Sengun because we don't necessarily need everybody shooting threes in today's NBA. But it is something that, hey, if you give him the ball in his hands, he can now try to create, isolate. He can do that step back. He can try to drive to the basket, get fouled, et cetera, et cetera. Has a little bit more options on that side of the basketball. And I think he has the tools to be a really good defensive player. To your point, though, Sengun right now in this season is averaging a steal and a block. So he's not playing bad, but some of that is scheme specific because of how defensive minded Udoka is as a coach. So I'm not trying to take that away from him because he's actually and performing, with what he's being asked to do. But at the same time, I don't know if that's his natural, mode of operation, if you will, to be that defensive minded. Anyway, these are 2 really great basketball players. It's hard to say anything disparaging about either one of them because I think they both have a high ceiling. Paulo might make the All-Star team this year, while I think Sengun is definitely on his way in the Western Conference.
Absolutely. Okay, I got one last question to ask you, Shaw. And this is, again, no diss, no knock for the current coaches who have access to these 2 players that we have dubbed in our segment of Who You Got.
Yep.
But if you had an opportunity to put a coach to see what could come of the, being under the teachings of said coach, who would you pick for Banchero? Who would you pick for Sengun?
Well, I think that's really interesting. So if I'm going by their overall skill sets right now, right? So I just want to see them max potential at what they're probably best at. I would probably pick somebody who's a little bit more offensive minded for Sengun, and whoever you think that ultimately is right now. I don't know who you think.
I was going to go. I would love to see Budenholzer to have a crack at Sengun.
That's interesting. Bringing him back. I think the most offensive minded coach I think of our generation, if you will, is probably Mike D'Antoni. So,
right.
He's like, hey, go out here.
Mad damn scientist. That's
He's a wild dude. But ironically, Carlisle, because of how he gives off like this kind of stern impression, but he's a great offensive coach. Hence what you see what's going on in Indiana right now as well, too. Right. So I think that'd be an interesting situation for him. And I don't want to knock what Jamal Mosley has done. I think he's been the right guy.
Yeah, that's why we're not knocking him. I'm just thinking outside the box a little bit. Like if I had, somebody, if I needed to have a mad scientist moment, who would I want to be pairing up? To have access to this dude. That's all I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, and I think for Paulo,
Mosley doesn't have enough teeth in the game just yet, but not that he isn't earning it with what he's
for sure
showing, what he's showing us in the Orlando Magic and what they've done. So
yeah, no, for sure. And for Paulo, I'm gonna just throw T. Lue out there. I think T. Lue would be somebody who can definitely open up things for Paulo even more so than they currently are, and especially with his pedigree of having coached LeBron, now having coached Paul George and Kawhi, guys who Banchero are kind of some of his contemporaries to some degree, who he's obviously going to strive to be like. I think those 2 guys in today's current NBA, I still stand by Eric Spoelstra being the best coach in the league. But he's going to have those guys working on defense so much. I think he's going to shut down their natural offensive capabilities to some degree, because, Spo is very much a system and culture guy. Shouts to him too. As also, we didn't put that in our news and notes. He got a super mega extension from the Heat. Will be coaching there for quite some time as the highest paid coach in the NBA, which he ultimately deserves as well too. So, but that would be my pick. T. Lue for Paulo and then I'd say D'Antoni for Sengun, just to kind of open up things a little bit.
Yeah, man, that's pretty nice. I like that. Man, can you believe, we blew through like 50 minutes, with this kind of content. And listen, we could probably keep going if we really, really wanted to, but I'm actually, very much amazed at like how much, a week can, what I'm saying, whet the basketball palate for
Yeah.
discussion. You know what I'm saying? So
No, for sure, for sure. And I think it's always fun when we get to do these segments. And we do this in a way just for us to continue to have fun, but to stimulate the basketball ethos and conversation that are out there. We don't like to make it easy on ourselves. And if you don't agree with us, let us know. But we both went in different directions. So let us know who you side with. Are you on the Sengun side or the Banchero side? And the why. And who'd like to see for potential who you got down the line as well too. We love to have these kind of conversations, but it can't make it too easy. So I think a lot of the NBA pundits, if you will, would probably pick Banchero only because of that's just what we're used to. 6'10", versatile, wing guy who can dribble and score and all of those things. But if you're looking closely, Sengun is having a monster year, and Udoka, even to some degree, I think even recently said he's like, I got here. And yeah, I saw him and I knew he was good. I didn't know it was this.
good.
All right. And he's having to unleash and give him more responsibilities as a result of the talent that he's showing. And good, bad, or indifferent. Listen, Kevin Porter's out of town, right? But they also realize that Jalen Green doesn't have to be the face of the franchise just because he was drafted so highly and overtime elite and all of those things. Sengun's a better basketball player and a better player for them to build off of right now. And they're doing just that. So I really credit that organization for falling in line, and even Jalen Green for falling in line as well, too, not forcing the issue, saying, well, no, it should be me. It should be my turn. They brought in Van Vliet. He's doing a great job kind of balancing that team on a regular basis. Dylan Brooks, as we alluded to, but they know Sengun is where their bread is proverbially buttered, and that's been awesome to see.
Yeah, and to your point, the team sees that as well too, and I think are proactively advocating that they want to ride his shoulders because they see the upside and the potential that he can ultimately bring, not to just that organization, but to his teammates as well too. This has been an awesome show, Shaw, as per usual. You know what I'm saying? Glad we were able to get this one under the blanket before the storm hits. You know what I'm saying? Because that's all we're doing right now. We just storming up north. So,
Sorry to hear that.
But as always, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, you know where to find us. Catch up with you next time.